Okay, as we enter into the Christmas season here, it's one of my favorite times of the year, and I've always had a special connection to it. It's something that was totally different when the earth would freeze over like this, and I'm sure that same feeling that ran through me was similar in some way to ancient people that had the same type of feelings back in the old days where it didn't rain, but down came these crystal flakes from heaven and kind of froze things over, kind of put things in a stasis. It seemed to kind of really be close to killing off a lot of creatures, a lot of things, a lot of bugs and a lot of pests too, which was a good thing. But ancient history goes way back. It goes much farther back than we currently like to record it at, and it's something that I show to you constantly. Um, Now, I do want to, at the beginning, of course, of this video, to thank everybody for sticking with me through all these videos where I do release some of this information to you and try to show you aspects of things. Indeed, I feel like I fail constantly and don't put things together as well as I should. I look back at some of them and I say and things a few times, and it's like, really? I could have gone into a lot deeper than that, but I seem to have been trying to get past that moment to the next thing to say, rather than really clarifying slowly. I'm indeed no David Attenborough of narration, but I'm trying in a realistic way to get this information across to you that I found and accrued up, and indeed wasn't allowed to even really talk about. And hell, just a few hundred years ago, no one could talk about this type of thing. It was, oh, you were a witch. Shortly before that, it was even worse than that, but we're not going there in this video here. So we're looking at a Christmas tree here, and it's one of those special outdoor ones where the people run the electricity out to it, and they'll have it out in the yard. I think it's one of the neater things that you can do, and a lot of yards here in Texas have this effect going on, and they really dress up the yards well. Some neighborhoods are totally done, and in that process it even looks better if it ever snows. But if it doesn't, they have a lot of incredible setups they go on. Well, looking at this Christmas tree we have here, what we're looking at is something more like an evergreen tree, right? And this evergreen tree worship supposedly stems from Germanic and Tannenbaum and the Celtic people, and them having holly and boughs and things and Yule logs and how they made that up. But no, indeed, that is a strong reference and pulled together in one thing that couldn't be denied or left alone. But it indeed goes back farther than that. The earliest references I find for this Christmas tree come from the Sumerians. In the ancient Sumerians, before Akkadian, pre-Akkadian Sumerians, in the earliest writings, and they tell you in these writings that it's not really about now. It didn't just happen. This happened a long, long time ago, and it involved Dumuzi and Enharsog, and how he was reborn and helped to save everybody. And in looking at the tale, it's strange, but it seems that when he goes to hell every year, this deal was made. And it's the deal that's also made in the same conjecture and concept in the Greeks, which does tie this together somewhat. But this idea that in the fall and the autumn, when all the leaves leave the tree, this is because Dumuzi has left and gone to the underworld. And he goes to the underworld and he stays there through the winter and the death of winter, and it's going to screw everybody over and everything's going to die. But he comes back in spring, and as he gets here in spring, all the flowers come to life and things along that nature. It's the rites of spring and Easter. This is where we get the concept of Easter. This is whenever we have more sunlight finally taking over the darkness of winter. At fall, in autumn, or what we call the fall starts the point where the darkness overtakes the amount of light in the day as the sun goes lower and lower and lower in the sky. It goes 1 degree per day, And the people that first noted this, again, were these Sumerians, and how we get our degrees that we go off of is from them. They had a base 6 and 60. They had ancient trigonometry that used to calculate things like this, and stars' precessions and movements, and indeed plots of land with geometry and all types of extreme mathematical concepts we're just finding out about now today. Clearly 150 years ago, it was a myth that it really kind of existed. And then now we look at it and we realize that it clearly did exist. And in the last 50, 60 years, we've deciphered many of these tablets, and people have looked into it, and there's been a lot of aha moments, quite a few aha moments. And they're still going on. This one I talk about with the trigonometry was just found out 3 years ago, maybe at the most, coming up on 3 years or so. I've made a video about it, and it's one of these that have all these little numbers and computation looking things on it, and they couldn't figure out what it was supposedly all about till they took it to a base 6, and whenever they did, they realized that it was all correlational, and then it was trigonometry, points on a curve, basically, an arc. And it was an easier to do form than even our normal trigonometry. The formula we use, theirs seems to be much more simplistic and a little bit more refined than our own, which is kind of strange looking back at this amount of time. But these ancient Sumerians, they had a tale of Dumuzi, and the story is what they would do, and it's even shown in your Bible where they talk about these heretics, and what they would do was they would take a tree indoors. And you can see this in the Sumerians where they have these pine cones, and they're up at this tree of life that doesn't really look like this tree, or really like a cedar, which it would have been from there, but indeed it's symbolic. And then the drawing that they had of the tree of life was them actually growing indoor gardening, if you'll look at it, almost up trellises and things like that. And we know now that they genetically messed with their plants and all types of things. So this was not something that was just for one little season of a year and maybe a festival type concept. Now we herald it as being that through this time. And we do it at a time that would be the least advantageous to humanity or mankind, a time of depression. Until not too long ago, winters were extremely difficult. In fact, in third world countries that are not equatorial or near equatorial, tropical if you will, they have extreme problems during these times. This is where you get your whole potato famines, you get the Bolshevik problems, you get the things, Russia, Napoleon and his, the Battle of Waterloo, Washington crossing the Delaware, all these problems that can happen during cold, which can cause a lot of extreme other problems. Well, back in ancient times, people lived extremely closer to the equator. In fact, most everybody was living inter-equatorial, in other words, inside the Tropic of Capricorn and Tropic of Cancer, which are your lines that are above and below the equator, respectively. And inside of that, it's your natural boundary that whenever the sun leans all the way down one way, that becomes the middle or the median line or the equator due to the leaning. And then when it leans back, the other line becomes the equator. So past that line, it does get definitely warm, but it's almost a percentage concept. And so you get above that line quite a bit. We are to this day quite a bit. If you look where North America is, where Europe is and things on there, but then you have an Arctic circle that's up above that stays below a certain point, except for a small portion of the year at the peak of summer, and after that it creeps back down. And so there's a boundary there. Anyhow, the things that don't care about this boundary are these magic trees. You see, everything else in the Ice Age freezes over, but these trees still bear nuts and things you can eat. I don't know if you know about old commercials and cereals and stuff, but there's this thing that was in America called grape nuts. They still have it to this day. It's little granola is what it really kind of is. But whenever you're a kid, there was these commercials and it said many parts of a pine tree are edible. There was this guy named Yule Gibbons, and he was on, and he was like a range man, or the type of guy that would woodsman, a guy that could really survive on his own. He really wasn't too much different than the old, pelt trekkers and things along that line. And he was somewhat of a naturalist. They had him on TV commercials for a while whenever I was a kid, and that was one of the ones that really stood out, where he, because that made you think, well, what am I eating up here? Granulated up pine bark? I mean, what the hell's going on here, Mom? But it really wasn't. It was granola, when everybody was crazy about granola. But he was trying to describe how bark and nuts and things like that, but also the fact that, that struck me as odd. So I looked into it, and of course the pine cones have seeds in them, and you can put those near warmth, like a fire, and have them open up and get all the seeds out of them, and it's quite nutritious. Now, seeds are like an egg, and these trees that we're talking about here all create these acorns and these seeds, right? Well, these seeds, like these walnuts, if you will, and pecans, and all of those type of deciduous nuts, are for trees that make it through the winter, but they shed off nuts that grow throughout the year, and they become something you can harvest, and they last as long as you can through winter. So try to come into winter as strong as possible, have feasts like Thanksgiving, get past that, and try to make it through winter. They used to call it the death of winter for a reason, because if things go bad, you have a bad winter, it can really screw you up. I don't know if anybody remembers the old Little House on the Prairie books, though, but in there they have a few bad winters, and things, and that kind of led you an idea. And it's a children's type of book, too, so they don't go into depth on the reality of that situation too much. They leave it to your imagination, but then our imagination can be quite clear. One weird thing about this Sumerian people, they would take these trees indoors and they would keep them alive, and they said that they would adorn them, that they would, it talks about it in the Bible too, that they would take thinly hammered pieces of metal drawn to ornates and designs to their gods and hang them upon the tree, shiny. Being near the fire, one of the tablets talked about how the fact that they have all this metal on them that is all shiny, and being near the fire with their glare that comes off of them, kind of like the picture you see here, that it looked as though the tree was on fire. But it did not burn. And that's kind of strange, because that harkens to the idea, and maybe you can see it now by looking at this, that this is some type of tree that you could deify or see God talking about or witnessing or seeing people speaking of, and that this is a tree that looked to be on fire, but it does not burn. Eventually they started putting tallow candles all over the outer branches and lighting them, being real careful, of course, but this led to a lot of people's homes burning down and a lot of big problems. And it still went on all the way through till today. Even electrical fires created today by bad wiring, so you really want to be careful about that. And I want all of y'all to be careful through this holiday season. I cherish life itself. I think we all do, and I want us all to have a good, safe winter. Screw the dumbass, type stuff. Let's we can have that moment of Christmas. Even my trolls, hey man, y'all be safe. Watch out when it starts to ice over. Be careful. Remember, I said that too whenever you're driving around. Just be a little careful, because it ain't you. It's that guy that was just about to plow right into your ass because he ain't being careful. Just be careful, man. And have a great Christmas. Have a good, happy, and festive and joyous family getting together Christmas. It's kind of terrible we have to set forth all of these pagan things together to try to get all this to try to happen. But then again, it's the reason for the season. Or perhaps the reason for the season of people coming together is that they used to have to do so to even survive through winter in the older times. And this concept and this feeling is there. And we have it. We can have it throughout the year. If you don't get to see your grandparents every couple of years, you can have it any time. But if you do it during the holidays, it's just that much more special, especially if you used to spend it with them whenever you were quite young, and now you're older and you perhaps have kids. It really starts to show you that there's this whole circle of life and these trees. And if you look at this tree here, it's always said that they picked a tree that was not an elder tree, that the elder trees would be chopped down to make space for the younger trees to grow, and those elder trees would be burnt to help fuel the fires to make it through winter, to cook, to do things like that. Well, that whole area used to be covered with cedar forests. Picture yourself in, I don't know, between Colorado and Washington State, and the way that looked. And it's just covered with deciduous forest. Well, this is the way the whole Levant used to be, and all of Sumeria, just a few thousand years ago. People don't realize that once it turned to a desert, these somewhat winterish plants, or colder weather plants, don't like it so much, and they start to fade off. There's only certain genus or whatever, or certain ones of these that actually do thrive well right around the equator. You have certain types of pines and things, but this northern pine is what we're looking for, and they call it that for a reason. And there's a tree line on ice also, to where how high can you go before it stops. And so you have this area. Now these trees symbolize people too, because these trees were able to somehow magically make it through this death of the ice age that they hope doesn't come back, and this death of winter. Now this 1 degree thing I was talking about a minute ago of the sun, and as it fades through fall, well, it falls 1 degree per day, exactly, all the way through winter, and then it reaches the death of winter at December 21st, where it quits falling, but it doesn't start rising or anything for 3 days. It seems to, due to our wobble that we have, it just seems to stay still. If you were to mark it, it really doesn't move. It's still there, still there, still there. Then it begins to rise again. Now, God made all these things, and the way things run, and the cycle of life, and the circle of life itself. And so this is God's Son going through this thing, and we used to not believe that it was us spinning and wobbling, but it was the sun doing all these things, and we were just sitting here being affected by them. Knowing now what we know, and how it is totally different. We're not the center of anything, and the universe is huge, and we're not inside of a snow globe, which is what this looks like, and what the idea of Christmas, is. But then again, that's the idea of the ancient map that they had, where it was a flat earth. We're up under a dome. It's a snow globe. There's your snow globe. We're looking at it, right? Well, somehow that concept's taken out of flavor a little bit. It's a little not correct with what the ancient Sumerians originally had. One of their stories, they go way up into heaven and get to meet Inanna and the gods and ask for help, and in doing so, he's very scared, but he looks down, and they talk about the world going away. People become ants, and then he slowly but surely goes through the clouds, scared and holding on. He eventually has enough courage to look back, and the world is white on the top and white on the bottom, and blue in the center with brown and green. And so brown and green are the lands, the blue is the ocean, and white on top and bottom is the caps, the polar caps. It's like a hat, a top on it, right? And the world's round. In that idea they had there, when they draw their maps, they draw it to be this circle with water all around it. But how does that idea of firmament, the fact that they can go up onto mountains, and what is raining as rain becomes solid ice, and ice is firmament, right? Ike would be the ice, and that's frozen water. That's what's above and below, and there are waters held back above and below. Well, their idea was that water's in space and we're in a bubble. Yeah, that's what they said, exactly. That's the way they understood it. Seems like the ancient Sumerians might have been hinting at the fact that there's a lot of water trapped in the ice above and below, and when it all melts, it caused a lot of flooding, but not really the whole world. But the ice from all the mountains flooding caused it to flood all of Sumeria and caused the giant problem of the flood. I just went through Genesis on this whole 5 series thing that I've done. And when I did the compilation video at the end of it, apparently I said 1 or 2 things that were totally out of flavor because they flagged it in 2 views. This tells me that somebody's A, watching my stuff, and 2, I've got to be real careful about what I say, and I think I know what I said, but we're not going to get into that right now, for I can't say what I didn't say. But this tree effect that we have here, you know, trees are used for life. You can get everything out of a tree. Your body creates sugars and things like that. Well, maple trees have maple syrup, and that's really just a tree sap. Imagine that. And they talk about how they get a life elixir out of these trees by bending them and doing this thing where they ceremonially cut it, and Dumuzi comes out. Well, Dumuzi, so you mean it come oozing in out? You know, because here we have sap come oozing out, and this is very much like a honey, but instead somehow like an ambrosia type of thing. Now, I'm not telling you the ancient Sumerians had maple trees. I'm just telling you how we can get this elixir of life out of trees that, while the rest of the world is dying, are making it through it simplistically. And all of the trees around it here, the nuts from those, are also sustaining us. Now, you can catch animals and stuff during this time too, but hunting is hard, and you pretty much have to wear those animal skins to have enough stuff on you. You run around and get sick out here, and it can be a problem. If it's the only way for your family to make through, it can be a huge problem unless you have someone else coming to help, people checking on people, people helping people out. This society that brought us civilization has this edict. They go around to each other. At Christmas time to this day, they bring you a date nut bread. You know what? Back in the day, that might have saved your ass. There's a lot of horror stories I could tell you that go along with winter, which should be lumped into a Christmas video, but I'm not trying to go there so much. I'm just giving us what would be my opening Christmas video here for the year, and a partial year-end video where I want to thank all my subscribers, and I thank y'all for sticking in. I know there's been a bunch of silly videos trying to debunk other people, but hey, they told me, hey, Whitey Cracker Cave Devil, prove it. And I kind of got tired of that, especially when they started trolling on videos that had nothing to do with anything that could have been. Anyhow, so it's been an interesting year. It's been fun. I've met some incredibly intelligent people. I've met some people that have odd views. I've met people that showed me a different view on things that I've never really thought of. I've actually, by a couple of people's showing me one thing, or hey, check this video out, in the process figured something out and made connections that I myself kind of probably had a little bit, but nowhere near, look at that, you know, type of connection where here it is. So I do appreciate all of y'all. I appreciate your comments. I understand sometimes I get impatient about the comments, and indeed, after going after these trolls, sometimes somebody will try to make an off comment, and if it's not done in the right way, we start going after each other too, and we really shouldn't do things like that at all. We're just trying to, you know, have it. Maybe we need to watch how we approach things like that and watch, you know, what we're doing. But I think we realize it. Sometimes we make a mistake. We don't want to make mistakes. We just want to clarify what's going on. And there actually is really no mistakes. When somebody clarifies after that, hopefully they will, we get an understanding. It's too bad we can't all sit in a room and talk. If we could, we'd get a lot more understanding known. I'd almost like to do one of my videos and be able to talk to y'all for 20 minutes. I've thought about doing live and having where y'all can comment and me start talking about it, and indeed doing something like, hey, what do you want to talk about? And somebody could spit some information up on the right, and we'll look at it. We'll start talking about it, and I'll yammer on about what I know. But I do have a lot of videos still to make. I have over 100 videos still left to make, and that doesn't even include biblical reference stuff. We're concentrating on it right now a little bit, but it really isn't what I'm geared for, even in all my stuff, because it goes past that. It goes past 700 AD easily. It goes right on past. It goes past 4000 BC, where supposedly that's the start of everything. So it indeed goes on past that. But at one time, Dumuzi was a child that was said to have saved the world. That Nimrod's kid was said to save the world. That the illegal child that was the Moses that happened, that was Sargon, was said to have saved the world, put into a basket and floated down a river, where we get the Moses story from. Indeed, Horus is said to have saved the world. Indeed, it's said that Seth, or Seti, the red-headed god Typhon, actually helped save the world whenever it was almost seems like an Atlantean battle of the sea people in an ancient time. Indeed, there's a ancient battle of the Greeks that's talked about with that Atlantean story from Solon that said they were the ones that stood fast and helped to save all of mankind, but they don't remember it because a flood wiped them out. In fact, there's been a few floods, but they only remember the last one because they pretty much got wiped out. Whenever you look at it, everybody says the Egyptians got their stuff from Greece. Greece got everything from the Egyptians. When you look into Egyptians, when they looked into origins and stuff, they said that the Greeks predate them by 1,000 years. So it's kind of tit for tat on who they thought who did what. Everybody talks about how much the Greeks learned there, but wasn't that at the Library of Alexandria? And wasn't that after Alexander? And wasn't there already before this time a lot of precognition and a lot of working together with each other? And Herodotus and all the people, and Solon himself, and all these people that were having easily well-wanted interaction between these Egyptians. It wasn't a problem. It was a sharing of knowledge. But this Christmas tree that we see, that's perhaps also a burning bush that does not end, that we symbolize each year, that's an evergreen tree, something that will not die, something that's within us all, is this idea that we made it, and we made it due to this thing, which is somehow ancestor veneration. It really is. It's ancestor veneration built on star and zodiacal concepts, and saying that this is how it all happens. And the story I told you before about degrees in the sun, so this Son of God that goes low in the sky, it gets nearest this constellation called the Southern Cross. And so the story that you could have been told in ancient days, through Persian days, through to the Bible, and even till now, would have been that the Son of God dies on a cross, and 3 days later he rises again to save all mankind from the death of an ice age or another winter. That Jesus is a sun god rising again and coming back again. Easter heralds the fact that he overtakes the darkness, and these are all symbolic stories that are built around how it all happens. Whenever you try to correlate it to what actually went down, you can try to make connections, but it's much easier to really see the reality of it. You have to kind of go deep into each of these cultures that surrounds all this and what they went through, and once you do, you're kind of like, well, hold on a minute. And then of course the answer is, well, it's all pagan, but we kind of adopted it to make everybody feel more comfortable about the religion. Well, hold on. Whose God are you worshiping here? Because this is the whole thing about Saturn. This is the thing about Nimrod. This is Semiramis and Dumuzi. This is all that stuff. And it even says in the Bible, a part of it, that it's supposedly bad, or something. But it's what we do to deify Christ himself and the whole unification. So it kind of shows you what the reality was of what overpowered what. When they keep talking about how Babylon was Babylon the Great, and then it went to crap somehow. Abraham came from Ur. All these stories come from Sumerian. And it wasn't really crap. It went to crap, and then the people that took it over didn't let it become great again, and then the people that were there, that were expelled out and exiled away, never really returned, and they made their own thing up in an area that would have been much like the equator during the Ice Age, that Goldilocks area, where people are living off of trees and the fruits of trees and the nuts of trees, and it helps them throughout the entire winter. And that people used to be tree worshippers, and you hear about tree huggers and all this type of thing, and it's where this concept comes from and why we have a tree thing into there. It's not because we're monkeys swinging from trees, it's because that tree, the nuts, the fruit that's on that during the depth of the winter, this is the only one that's still alive. You can dig around the ground and try to find nuts under pecan trees, under walnut trees, but this thing still has edible places on it too. And this is the thing that does not die. It lives right through the whole winter. It made it. We made it. It's a symbol of mankind and how trees branch out. And one tree can drop seeds and become a group that you have at your Christmas party of your family. But if you think about it, that's just one little branch end of a branch arm that goes way back on this tree, and indeed encompasses a large vibrated area of people that you don't even know you're related to. And if we go back farther, we find out it starts pulling into a common ground that these Caucasians had of the area back when the Proto-Indo-Europeans, from India to Russia to Europe to the entire Levant area, North Africa, and Egypt, were all these extremely similar same people that over time now, coming out of the last ice age, started to diverge slightly. Later admixing with people that were the afar ended up causing slight variations on a theme. But from that, we get this story. And sometimes there's more reality in the original story than there might be in the one that we embrace today. Just a beginning opening here though, and I know it's gone longer than I thought. I thought I'd do a 20-25 minute video, and it's gone over 30, I'm sure. But I do want to share with y'all the joy of Christmas, and that family, friends, life, and those type of things, and the fact of looking at the juiciness of life through the year, that we can look back at when the world covers with a death. Oh no. And we can look back at knowing that we're okay and we're going to come out of it. Just got to make it through. And now with all of modern civilization, we have a lot easier time, and all of our heating and things that we have. But in doing so, we're safe, but we're also still venerating this ancient concept that goes back now over 2,000 years, but actually comes from something well over 4,000 years before that. And indeed, that story, when they wrote it down, was not about yesterday, but about a time long, long before. The ancient Sumerians' kings list shows Dumuzi reigning for 28,800 years, which is really kind of a zodiacal clock number, but at the same time, that's a lot longer than we're willing to give credit of anything. Even if one of those SARS is a year, is a moon, and you divide it by 13, that still puts it at 7,600 BC. Well, not too long before that was Göbekli Tepe and the lords of Arata that the Sumerians talk about, where they apparently had come down from to be the farmers that helped to feed the population that was to grow. And they kind of understood that in separate city-states, working in conjunction with each city-state kind of having their own little flair, and by trading amongst themselves became a unity that really wasn't just under one fist at one time, but no one needed a fist. It just ran. It just was. By was, I mean it was gone in a flash. And now looking back at that one time, that is perhaps an era that more magical things happened than at any time in history, short of our Industrial Revolution till now. If you think about it, my granddad grew up and there were no cars, no radio, no TV, no nothing, and he watched it all happen from people still in horses to the first cars, radio, television, TV, and then people went to the moon. They flew and they went to the moon, all inside of his generation. It had to be quite mind-blowing. And indeed, we can see, if you have any age on you, get around 40, 50 years old, you can see how the world's changed dramatically during your lifetime. Kids now don't see it. It's just kind of expected. Wasn't everything all electronic, super do? No, not so much. TVs weren't this big before, and a lot of things weren't going on like this. This computer that we're talking on right now wasn't really happening. You go back far enough and you had to watch this on a TV. If you missed it, you missed it, unless you recorded it on your VCR. And then you had to watch it on these little old tapes. Not too much before that, you had to have caught it on film or you didn't know anything. Imagine how the unbabblizing of the world is changing and we are shooting through the roof. It's pretty amazing. Merry Christmas, all y'all. Happy holidays. Whatever it takes to make you happy, to understand that that's what really I feel all this is about. It's a tenderness and caring, and it's between family, and ancestor veneration brings that about. And whenever you're with family, these are your ancestors. This is your lineage. This is what directly brought you. Perhaps you talk about great-grandma before she died and so on. You can't go back too far. We don't have the Begot family, I'm sure, when we have our Christmas things. Maybe we should somewhat. Look at that. Look at your Scottish family crest. Talk about things, you know. See if you found out anything new, if the family even looks into it. It's quite interesting when you do, and it gives you a sense of heritage, but that only usually leads back a few hundred years. Whenever what we're talking about here is a concept that goes back many, many thousands of years. Merry Christmas. Y'all enjoy. I'll see you again soon. Peace. Goodwill towards men.